Chapter 13: Alchemy's First Spark. The smell of heated herbs mixed with the light aroma of magical incense burning in silver holders at the ends of the room. It was the first alchemy class. All the first-year Class S students were gathered there. The alchemy lab was spacious, with a high ceiling and arched windows that let natural light flood the room. The circular benches were organized into groups, each with cauldrons, labeled flasks, and ingredients. In other academies, maybe this subject would be optional. But at Vehard Academy, alchemy was mandatory for everyone. Professor Melis was a woman with a simple appearance, light brown hair tied in a practical bun, and an expression always attentive to details. She walked calmly among the groups, observing every mixture they made and every ingredient they picked, as if nothing escaped her trained eyes. Even after years of teaching, she still seemed more excited than the students themselves. Anyone seeing her would certainly say she loved what she did. And how could she not? She was a commoner. A regular woman who had dedicated herself so much to alchemy that she earned the title of professor at the most prestigious magic academy on the continent. A position so contested that not even noble titles guaranteed a spot. It took real talent, dedication, and undeniable recognition. As she passed by the groups, Melis approached two students. "It's good, but don't forget to add a drop of distilled grey herb. Without it, the catalyst won't stabilize." At the next table, she stopped for a few seconds, observing the temperature of a solution being heated. "The heat's too high. Lower it a bit before adding the mirror root oil or you'll evaporate the ethereal traces." Melis was everywhere, guiding all the students. Helping anyone who needed it. But that help didn't seem to reach a certain pair. "Are you sure this is right?" "I'm not sure either, but that's the ingredient listed in the book." Marco and Cain were together at one of the tables, trying to create what the professor had asked for. An elemental purification solution. But they were clearly far from the expected result. Their mixture had turned an intense orange color and was giving off a suspicious smell. "This looks like brick soup with rotten mushroom stink." Cain pulled back with a wrinkled nose. He had played Chronos Realms for years. He had done countless alchemy-related quests in the game. But clicking buttons to brew, craft, or fuse magic was very different from real life. He knew items, ingredients, and recipes by heart. But applying everything with exact measurements, temperature control, and timing? If that existed in the game, the developer would have been hunted down. Marco, completely focused, grabbed more of the light blue liquid called runic lotus essence and poured it into the cauldron. Pzzzzhhhhh. A thick smoke rose, and the mixture bubbled violently before splashing out. It's hot." Marco dropped the enchanted spoon and started cleaning the mess with a cloth. "You're really a beginner, Marco, but you don't know what to do either." Yen, at a nearby table, let out a small, contained laugh at the scene. "Looks like he's bad at something after all." Cain sighed. "Just get better." While Marco was still cleaning up the mess, a young man approached their bench. It was the professor's assistant. Blonde hair perfectly combed, clothes neat, a cold expression, and eyes that judged before saying a word. He looked at the table, then at Marco and Cain, with visible disdain. "You're terrible at this." His voice was dry, almost insulting. Sorry, Professor." Marco tried to apologize. But he continued. "The Academy's been really generous lately, looks like even commoners stumbling over simple potions can get a spot here." Without waiting for an answer, he gave a few quick instructions, corrected the ingredient sequence, and walked away. Marco stood still for a few seconds, then muttered, "He definitely hates commoners like us." "I'm not a commoner." Marco turned his head slowly. "Cain, you're a commoner too." "My soul is noble." "And what does that even have to do with?" Marco kept mumbling. But Cain wasn't listening anymore. His mind had entered Chronos Realms story mode. Right after the tutorial of the game, the first major story arc was called Blood of Gold, Soul of Glass. An arc centered around alchemy, where an ambitious assistant tried to sabotage the professor who had trained him, all out of envy for her commoner origins. Cain remembered it clearly. That was where the real problem started. And he knew exactly who the center of it was. Voltaire, assistant professor to Melis, was a walking bomb about to explode. And Cain knew the explosion was close. It was 1832 in the evening. Cain was in a place he wasn't a big fan of. The Veyhard Academy library was enormous, with tall shelves reaching almost to the vaulted ceiling. The magical lighting was soft and yellowish. The environment was silent, but the smell of old paper and dried potions hung in the air like a subtle mist. He was in the experimental alchemy section. An area less visited, filled with incomplete books, unfinished notes, and unverified recipes. For anyone who wanted to get famous by completing an abandoned project, it was a goldmine. But at the academy, no one had time to waste on something that wasn't mandatory. His fingers ran along the book spines until they stopped on a specific one. Found you. Luckily, it had only taken him 43 minutes to find it. The title and cover were identical to the one from the game. Inner Paths, Flow Rotations and Forgotten Elixirs. The cover was simple, made of dark leather with silver details already a bit worn. Cain was already sitting at one of the tables in the back, leaning like he could fall asleep at any moment. Even though he didn't really like reading, he had no choice. He had to read a lot during his years playing the game to master his favorite main. When he opened the book, he noticed that many of the details mentioned in the game were still there. Exactly as he remembered. That was the book he had only gotten after completing an almost useless quest, given by a random NPC living in a forgotten corner of the map, literally at the end of the world. He still remembered the frustration. The character evolution quest only rewarded an old book. And it was a quest with no fighting, just interacting with characters. For someone who loved PvE and PvP, doing missions with only dialogue was the same as being sentenced to death by boredom. Back then, he almost deleted the item. But over time, he discovered the real value of that book. Flipping through a few more pages, his eyes stopped at the part he was looking for. Perfect, the title of the formula was written at the top of the page: Internal Pulse Essence, a liquid mixture used to accelerate the flow of mana through the body for a short period. It increased the connection between the mind and magical conduction, allowing faster spell casting or physical techniques based on energy. On that specific page, there was no mention of the ingredients, only the description of the effect and the preparation ritual. But that wasn't a problem for Cain. He remembered every necessary ingredient by heart. After getting the book through the quest, he had to spend even more in-game money buying the ingredient list from a second NPC. Just thinking about it made him irritated. He had to grind through slow, boring quests to get the book, and then still pay for information that should have been included. Damned game. But something good came out of it. By completing the quest 100%, he received a forgotten research scroll called Stable Mana Bond. It was a level 2 formula that, at first glance, seemed like just a stronger version of the internal flow potion. But it wasn't temporary. It gave a permanent increase to the efficiency of mana flow through the body. An effect so rare that most people didn't even believe it existed. Of course, Cain still didn't have everything needed to replicate it in the real world. For now, he would settle for making the temporary version. And even if he would settle for the temporary one for now, he didn't intend to leave the permanent one behind. That formula was a clear goal, and sooner or later, he would find a way to complete it. After all, he depended on it to evolve. But now that he was there, maybe he could try replicating the simple recipe in the real world. And he already knew exactly where he could find the ingredients. At the end of the last class, Professor Melis had mentioned that the next activity would be outdoors, in a field near the academy. The students would go out with her to collect natural ingredients and build their own alchemy kits based on the formulas they had learned. It was the perfect opportunity. Cain didn't need much, just a few of the basic items that would be scattered around. He would grab what he needed, without drawing attention. And it wasn't like he was stealing from Veyhard's stock, he'd only take 1 or 2 ingredients. Technically wrong? Yes. But considering the chaos he knew was about to come, it was fair to call it an early compensation. Chapter 14, Shadows Beneath Vehart. Valterre was in a place that looked like an old bar, with dark wooden walls, time-worn tables, and a light smell of alcohol and smoke in the air. The lights were yellowish and flickered softly, giving the place a suffocating and suspicious atmosphere. People whispered in corners, dealing with things that clearly weren't legal. He was sitting at a corner table, talking to a woman. "You're going to keep your word, right?" he asked the woman across from him. The woman had short, messy hair dyed black with a bluish tint. She wore tight black clothes full of small leather details, and several piercings adorned her ears and eyebrow. Her entire appearance screamed trouble to anyone looking. "Of course," she replied with a crooked smile, playing with a ring on her finger. "I already told you, if the director isn't at the academy, there's nothing to worry about. TSK. It better be true. I'm going to pay a heavy price if you idiots screw this up." Heh, a low chuckle escaped her lips. "You must really hate her to go this far. I'm starting to feel sorry for the poor thing. I already told you to mind your own business. Alright, but you mentioned it's going to be in an open area. Don't blame me if some students end up getting involved and don't come out so well." She then stared him in the eyes while putting the ring back on her finger. "And once you get what you want, don't forget to do your part. Do whatever you want. Just get rid of that annoying woman already. I can't stand seeing alchemy classes and projects being handled by someone like her anymore." He said this while standing up, pulling his hood over his face and leaving the place without looking back. It was clear Valterre was talking about Professor Melis. He truly hated commoners, but what fueled his hatred even more was having to take orders from someone like her, a commoner occupying a position he believed was reserved for nobles only. And the start of classes was the best time to get rid of her, since the director and vice-director always left for short meetings during this period. "I won't endure another year putting up with someone like her." 9:26 in the morning. The open training field stretched under the soft morning light. The ground was covered by low, firm grass, perfect for combat. Magical stone pillars surrounded the space, and a few trees around it cast irregular shadows across the terrain. In the center of the field, Elena was manipulating her flames with an almost natural grace. The flames flowed around her as if they had a life of their own, slithering from side to side in smooth, precise arcs. Every movement of her hands guided the fire, which spun, undulated, and molded itself as an extension of her own will. Any amateur watching would say it wasn't impressive, that it didn't have much destructive power, that the flames weren't big. But casting fire spells was one thing, freely manipulating fire, as an extension of one's will, was something entirely different. Whispers started to spread among some nobles seated farther away. Incredible, the flames obey her every gesture. As expected from someone of the Elrian lineage. Think I should ask her to teach me how to control flames like that? Put. You? She's high class, man. She heard the murmurs around her. For Elena, all of it was just a headache. In her past life, she would have been happy with the compliments. But now, she knew most of them were just empty flattery, clumsy attempts to please her, or admiration aimed not at her but at her bloodline. Of course, she was still proud of her lineage, but that strong pride, that childish desire to impress others, had long since disappeared. Clap, clap, clap. Sitting nearby, Lyra clapped with a cute, excited smile. Elena blushed lightly and cancelled the spell, visibly uncomfortable. "Stop it, you're embarrassing me, what? I'm enjoying the show. Sigh, I'm not performing for you." She sat down on the grass, resting a bit after the intense training. Lyra, still smiling, leaned closer and asked, "Where's that handsome boy?" Elena blinked, confused. "Handsome? Which boy?" "That one, with white hair and..." Lyra widened her eyes, showing her teeth like fangs and curving her hands forward, trying to imitate a vampire ready to attack. Vampire eyes. Elena pushed her away lightly when Lyra tried to get too close. "How should I know?" Lyra let out a little giggle. "Ah, you should know. You two have been pretty close lately." "What? Where are you getting that from?" "On. I heard you even bought him a drink the other day." Elena froze for a moment, remembering that scene she'd rather forget. Kane was fighting with a vending machine after inserting a few coins and trying to get a drink. The problem? Insufficient balance. On impulse, she paid for a drink for him. But the worst part was that even after getting the drink, Kane went back to the machine trying to recover his lost money. Is this for real? He's really impossible. She asked how much he had lost. 4 copper coins? And he was willing to destroy the machine over that. Trying to avoid a scandal, Elena patiently pulled some coins out of her pocket, and luckily, she had copper coins. She then gave him the exact 4 copper coins, hoping that would solve the problem. He looked at her. She looked at him. What am I supposed to do with 4 copper coins? Hey, hey. Elena. Elena snapped back to reality. Lyra was watching her with a mischievous little smile. Who were you thinking about? Elena looked away, huffing, and pushed her again. You imagine too much, Lyra. Her, close to Kane? It was weird to think about. But also, she couldn't deny she had been getting pretty close to him in the past few days. She wanted to see up close how Kane behaved. And the conclusion she kept coming to. He seems even crazier than before. To her, Kane was changing. But she still needed to find out if it would be for the better, or for the worse. Meanwhile, in another part of the academy, more specifically, outside it. Kane scratched his ear, distracted by the sounds of nature. Someone's talking about me? Hope it's something good. Kane was sitting on the grassy ground, surrounded by the sound of birds and the fresh scent of the trees. Beyond the academy's limits, there was a vast forest, and farther ahead, a quiet and peaceful grove. There, a small lake reflected the blue sky, and the gentle breeze made the leaves dance in soft movements. He had gone out once again to store mana in the grove. After losing almost all the energy he had accumulated over the past days, he had no choice. I hope that dwarf doesn't make me waste all my mana again. It was annoying to have to leave the academy and walk a few kilometers to the grove. Of course, he could very well do the whole process inside the academy, but it was harder and more exhausting. The more distractions around, the harder it was to store mana. And he could feel that the environment outside the academy was filled with pure mana, something he couldn't sense inside the academy walls. He went back to focusing, closing his eyes while gathering mana. A soft sound of wings flapping reached his ears. Like a small, persistent buzz, blending with the sound of the wind in the leaves. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Kane opened his eyes slowly. Not that damn fairy again. Chapter 15. I'm not a bug. I'm Saris. Whoa! You can finally hear me now? She stopped right in front of him, flying in small circles. You're really slow at storing mana, you know that? But then again, you can't expect much from dumb humans. This fairy again? What does she want with me? Kane closed his eyes again, trying to ignore her presence. I'll pretend I don't see her. Trying to ignore me again? Last time you were super rude, you know? You left me talking to myself. She flew around him angrily and, without asking for permission, sat on his head. You're not bad at storing mana, but you're still far from ideal, you know? If you want, I can teach you how to store mana properly. But only if you beg, of course. Before she could finish the sentence, Kane let out a light sound with his mouth. He made a lazy hand gesture, like shooing away a stubborn mosquito. Get off me. I'm busy here, you know? Hey! I'm not an insect, you jerk. Saris crossed her little arms and puffed her cheeks in anger, flying aggressively above him, releasing small sparks of irritated mana into the air. Why don't you stop bothering me and go play somewhere else? She stopped mid-air, huffing. What? Play? Do you even know who I am and how old I am? Don't care. I've lived longer than you and all these idiots who pass through this academy. She pointed at the symbol on his shirt, her face flushed with anger. Not my problem. Saris spun sharply in the air, flapping her wings hard like she was about to throw a tantrum at any moment. You're so arrogant. Ha! Cain let out a heavy sigh and, seeing he couldn't concentrate anymore, lay down on the grass, using his hands as a pillow. This fairy is really a nuisance. Should I just try to store mana back in my room from now on? Hey, I'm the great fairy Saris. What family are you from? Family? It was a simple question on Earth, but in Kronos realms, if someone asked about your family, they were probably asking about your noble lineage. However, for Cain, that meant nothing. In his old life, he didn't see himself as part of anything grand. Family? Titles? None of that. And now, even in another world, that tradition still felt distant and empty. I don't have a family. So you're a filthy commoner? I guess so. Guess? Wait. I'm not filthy, you damned fairy. Having played Kronos Realms for years, he knew his character's backstory. Cain was a street kid, no noble blood, no noteworthy past, but he wasn't filthy either. Well, all humans are the same, but I thought you might be from some important family since you're studying at this dumb academy. Alright, if you already know I'm a commoner, you can leave. Stop bothering me. I'm not bothering you. She shouted, making a cute angry face and puffing again, with a tiny spark of mana escaping her wings. Cain looked up at the clouds, feeling the environment around him. My senses are definitely sharper than before. The more mana he gathered, the more his senses expanded. But of course, there was a limit to how much he could store in his core. Hey, you never answered me last time. How can you store mana? Humans aren't supposed to be able to do that. She wasn't wrong. But that was a question even Cain couldn't explain. When they released the character in the game, the only thing he discovered was that Cain had a mana core where he could store large amounts of energy to fuel his abilities. Cain let out a small sigh. He opened one eye slowly, giving Saris a lazy look. No idea, what do you think? Saris paused midair for a second, surprised by his casual answer. She opened her mouth, ready to call him an idiot, but held back. She clenched her tiny fists, puffed quietly, and crossed her arms, turning her face slightly, trying not to look irritated. Calm down, Saris, don't make it worse. He can actually see you. She then floated closer, flying more slowly. Can you use spells? It was a direct and simple question, but it made Cain furrow his brow slightly. I can't use normal spells, but I use mana to create repulsion vectors. Does that count as a spell? Yes, Saris widened her eyes and pointed an accusing little finger at him. Stop lying. If you already know the answer, then why are you asking? She crossed her arms again, puffing her cheeks and letting out an indignant sigh. If I had to guess, I'd say your body is so messed up that mana gets trapped because it doesn't know where to go. Cain let out a muffled laugh and sat up on the grass. That's a good theory. Seeing the slight spark of interest in his eyes, Saris perked up, flying a bit closer. I don't think it's just a theory. And seeing how you come here to store mana, I'm guessing you're releasing it somehow even if you can't use spells. She's actually pretty smart. Cain knew that fairies were mystical beings who lived for millennia. She probably carried a lot of accumulated knowledge. Maybe she's not as useless as she acts. He watched her, a lazy smile creeping onto his lips. Saris narrowed her eyes suspiciously. I can see through that greedy smile of yours, you. She almost swore at him but closed her eyes instead, puffing her cheeks even more and trying to look threatening. Of course, her attempt was completely ineffective. Cain was having fun internally. He didn't say anything, but it was easy to tell she was struggling to maintain her composure, even though he had been teasing her non-stop since she arrived. Fairies, being creatures tied to pure mana, existed in different planes from humans. Only people with a naturally high mana flow could see them. And the worst part: fairies couldn't stray far from where they were born. Saris had probably been there for over 1,000 years. How many people had actually talked to her? How many had come back? Judging by her personality, probably none. Cain could act dumb, but he wasn't stupid. He knew that his current heightened senses were rare. He knew that, for Saris, meeting someone like him was almost an event. Probably, the ones who had seen her before were arrogant mages, with no time or patience to deal with a playful fairy. Cain looked at her again, smiling with a teasing touch. You don't want me to leave, do you? Her cheeks instantly turned red. What? What are you talking about? She spun quickly in the air, as if trying to hide her own reaction. Haha, relax. I plan to come back here more often anyway. Really? She said, trying to hide the excitement in her voice. Cain raised an eyebrow, his smile widening. Ahem. I mean, if you want to come back more often. I can teach you how to store mana properly. He then stood up, letting out a yawn. As long as you can help me store more mana and make it flow better, I don't mind. Saris, still flying in small circles above him, let slip a sincere smile before quickly masking it, turning her face and crossing her arms. Fine. Come back again and next time I'll make you less dumb. I mean, you'll learn something if I'm the one teaching. She said while pointing proudly at herself, puffing her chest and putting her tiny hands on her waist like she was declaring herself the most important master in the world. Saris was tiny, no bigger than a hand, with short blonde hair that floated lightly in the air and bright green eyes. Her transparent wings shimmered with a soft glow, like fragments of light dancing around her. The way she spoke and acted, Cain could only think she was adorable. Ah. And how did you even get into this academy without being able to use spells? You're a swordsman. Her voice faded as Saris began to disappear into particles of light, along with her vibrant little body. Looks like that was the time limit. Cain finished stretching, ready to head back to the academy. Just hope that dwarf doesn't come nag me again.